Page 1. I got it.
Says your life. You don't want to hire.
All right, Rambam Yomi for Tuesday, Zion of Tafshin Pei, Perek Shvi of Yisei Atera. So after 2 days of halachic prakim, we're returning today to a style that more resembles the beginning, the first few prakim that we started with. Meaning the Rambam is going to come and try to make a seder, try to sort out some emunah, some things relating to belief, to faith. He's going to be describing and defining some spiritual stuff. And this time regarding prophecy and prophets, Nevuah and Nevi'im, which is what mitzvah number 9 and mitzvah number 10 are about. The last ones in Hilchos Yesod HaTorah. And that's what the last 4 prakim are going to be about. Prakim Zayin, Ches, Tes, and Yud. Perek Zayin is going to be about just to define what is Nevuah, what's a prophetic revelation. And that's going to include explaining how Moshe's Nevuah was superior on the technical side, that everyone else is sleeping, he's awake, etc., as we'll see. Perek Ches is going to deal with Moshe's Nevuah in religious terms, how our whole religion is based on Moshe's Nevuah specifically, and how another Navi can't come and just change things and replace things. Perek Tes, we're going to learn about so what religious role do the other Nevi'im have, what effect can they have. And in Perek Yud, we're going to learn about believing when a prophet says that something's going to happen in the future, how does that work, that whole system. So we're going to learn each parak, we're going to learn each topic in detail. In general, it seems like this is a topic that the Rambam gets excited about. And possibly the reason is he felt that this is a subject that has a lot of misconceptions, a lot of mistakes. And a mistake in this kind of field can lead to who knows what. So he's giving us a quick course on Nevuah so that we don't have the wrong ideas, the wrong expectations. So in this parak, we're going to start off with a long description of Nevuah, and at the end, we're going to mention mitzvah tes all the way at the end in halacha zayin. Okay, Perek Shvi, halacha aleph. Miyaseidei hadas leida she'akel manabe es b'nei ha'adam. One of the foundations of the religion is to know that God gives prophecy to people. So he's mentioning it's Miyaseidei hadas. We're learning Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. It's an important foundation. And we included Nevuah there. So, yeah, clearly a very important foundation because the whole religion is based on it. And Menabe, so as we're going to explain, it's some kind of higher form of knowledge that a person can get from above, not through the normal course of thinking, of just thinking on your own, as we shall see. Now, what are the basic conditions? Let's start with the basic conditions. What kind of person is even in the realm, within the realm of possibility for getting Nevuah? So the Rambam says, "Ve'en nevuah chala ela chacham gadol b'chachma giber b'midaisav leyi yitzrei misgaber alav b'davar ba'olam elohu misgaber b'dayit al yitzrei tamid balder achavan achayna ad me'oid." So prophecy is never going to land on. It's never going to come to except anyone other than a very wise man, strong in his midos. I'm going to explain what I think these things mean in a second. His inclination doesn't overcome him. He always uses his mind to overcome his inclination, and he has a very wide and correct daya. Okay, so this seems a bit repetitious. Starts with chachmi, ends with daya, and then in the middle, gibar, and also misgaber al yitzrei. Is that the same thing? Is that two things? Part of the problem is how the way the Rambam uses the word deus and midos, right? Because deus, on the one hand, we have a whole section hilchos deus. I said on day one right away that seems to be traits, which we would probably just call midos. On the other hand, the Rambam definitely uses deya in the normal way when we spoke about the Dias Hashem, hu adeya, when we spoke about malachim, galgalim. He also uses deya to mean mind, knowledge. So that can sometimes be confusing. Also interesting that I'm using the word midas here. I actually looked around, and this is almost never uses the word midas anywhere. This is almost the only place. So how would I understand it? So I would say that, so what's the difference between chachma in the beginning and daya at the end? So either maybe chachma in the beginning could be the knowledge, the actual wisdom that a person accumulates over time, and maybe daya is his actual mind, his actual brain power. Or perhaps daya here actually is in the sense of Hilchos Deus traits, and it's a continuation to the middle, that he's a giber in his midos, and he has the right daya, he has the right traits, perhaps. What about the giber b'midosav and the continuing into the yitzrei misgaber? So either maybe it's just one continuation. He's explaining, well, how you giber with your midos if you always overcome your inclination, or maybe there's also not everyone who overcomes their inclination would otherwise be described as a gibor. Maybe there's something additional, that another trait that someone's described, there's something gibor-like about him. And I actually found in the Kutta Sichas in Chelik Chaf and Chayes Sarah Aleph, the Rabbi was talking about Yaakov who rolled off the stone, and Rashi says, let you know Yaakov was very strong. The Rabbi says clearly this must mean that it's important for us to know that Yaakov was very strong. This seems significant. And the Rabbi points out that there's a Rambam Chazal, which the Rambam may be using here, that the Shechina isn't Sheira, Ella al Gibor. So we see that being a Gibor on its own might be have some value. The Rabbi ends off, Ayin Rambam, say the Atayra Perek Shvi doesn't say, does this disprove that or not, but there is some science here. Anyway, so let's continue. So now that you have this foundation, let's move on to the next conditions. What are the next conditions? Adam shehu memula b'chol hamidus ha'elu. So someone who's filled with these kinds of midas. Here I use the word midas one more time, referring to everything he just said. You have all these midas. Shalem begufay, so complete in his body. So seemingly means literally, and either the Rambam means as opposed to having a deformity, or the Rambam means as opposed to being sickly, not just having, it's a distraction to if you have Yisurim. Point being, whatever the case is, the point is the body shouldn't be getting in the way. So Kshiyakanis la Pardes, when he enters into the Pardes, the orchard, which we already defined in Perek Daled, and as we said, the Rambam's conception of Pardes is just all the topics we learned so far in the first 4 prakim. Galgalim, Malachim, Yesaidus. So that's what he calls Shikanas Lapardes. And he's going to get into these very big, distant ideas. The TLA going to have the right mind, the right wisdom to understand, to grasp. And he's getting more and more holy, and he's separating himself more and more from just the ordinary ways of regular people who are following whatever darkness of the time there is. They're not thinking for themselves. He's separating himself from those people. And he's going and he's encouraging himself and training himself that his mind shouldn't be giving any thought to any of the nonsense, any of whatever nonsense is going on at the time. His mind is always free to focus on what's above. Shura Tachas Akise, tied up under the throne of God. Again, we mentioned Tachas Akise earlier, the idea of the Malachim that are under the throne, so to speak. So that's where his mind is. Lahavin Ba'isen Atsuris Akdeshus Hatoheres, focusing on those holy beings that are not, we said, they don't have a chaimer, they don't have a body, they're just tsuris, they're just form without matter. Mistakel b'chachmasei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu kula mitzuri sheina taber ha'aretz v'yadei mehen godlei, and he's looking at the wisdom of Hashem's entire wisdom, which extends all the way from the earliest, the highest malach, all the way down to the center of the earth, and from there he can glean. He sees Hashem's greatness. So miyad ruach hakodesh sheira alav. So just to comment on the mitzuri sheina taber ha'aretz, again, throughout the prakim I've been commenting. It was in Perek Dal, which I recorded. How much interest does the Rambam have in just studying the Fleis HaBeir in general, looking at the world in general? Because most of the time he seems to be focusing on these lofty stuff, but then he throws in through the looking at Hashem's wisdom all the way down to the center of the earth. So I was thinking that in Perek Daled, he was speaking about the Daled Yesodis, and he says how the Daled Yesodis, that's what everything that's alive, animals, stones, metals are all made out of Daled Yesodis. So he actually did mention all this random stuff down here on earth. So I still don't think that the Rambam thinks we should just be sitting and studying geology, but if it's in the context of the Daled Yesodis, which the Rambam considers to be a higher form of wisdom, and you're studying how the Daled Yesodis interact and how they affect things down here, so then that would be included in what the Rambam considers this higher wisdom, because he sees Daled Yesodis as being a direct expression of Hashem's wisdom. Again, probably not even in that case. You probably shouldn't be sitting and just thinking about bugs the whole day, even in the context of Daled Yesodis. But in this way, even by focusing to some extent on things down below, if it leads you back to that higher wisdom, and by the way, the Rambam had said over there that all these things are the kinds of things you can't see with your own eyes. They're all things you have to grasp intellectually. So as long as it's in that realm, it's like an intellectual pursuit, even though it concerns some physical things, that could even lead you to Nevuah according to the Rambam. So even in Chassidus, no one would say that Chassidus is talking about nature. But Chassidus does mention the Galam a lot. On the Daled Yisraelis, and sometimes there are places in Chassidus where Chassidus talks about the Daled Yisraelis, even the idea of Lach and Yavish, the moist and the dry. So you see this concept where you can speak about Gashmias in a way that fits in with a more abstract kind of Chachma. So that's where the thinking all the way down to Tabar Aretz comes in. Ruach HaKodesh, that's not Nevuah yet, and we're going to see in a moment in Halacha Beis what Nevuah actually is. So this is a step before Nevuah. So let's continue. So when this Ruach HaKodesh, when this spirit rests on him, this Art of Nafshe b'Mailas HaMalachim HaNikroim Ishim. So now he is sort of mingling, his mind, his soul is mingling now with the higher level, the lowest level of Malachim, who are called Ishim. And he's transformed to another person, another kind of person. And he'll be aware that he's no longer the way he was. But rather than now he's been upgraded above everyone else. Like it says regarding Shol, you'll prophesy with them, you'll turn to someone else. So when he says his mind, he'll mingle with the Malachim, it's like he'll unlock a higher consciousness. So it's not a specific revelation, not a specific fact. It's just entering another realm of knowledge, of understanding, of recognition. And also interesting that Rambam adds that he will know that he's no longer the way he was before. Interesting, self-consciousness always seems to be a part of the equation. We spoke earlier about Malachim, Galgalim. I think he always mentions that they are aware of who they are. That's a crucial part of being an advanced form of intelligence. And now he says, and from here on, from the end of the Halacha Aleph and onwards, he's going to bring a lot of psukim to prove different points that he's making, different psukim that concern Nevuah. So the first thing here is Shaul. What's the story with Shaul? So the story with Shaul is when he's rising to power, to greatness. So it starts off, he's searching for his lost donkeys, and he reaches Shmuel, and all of a sudden he finds out that Shmuel has this whole plan in mind for him, this great future for him, and Shmuel anointed him. On the way back, Shmuel told him that on your way, you're going to bump into a group of Nevi'im. We're going to mention that later also. And he's going to join them. And he says, this passage, you'll prophesy with them and you'll turn into someone else. So this is where we see that it transforms the person, even though we're actually talking about the Ruach HaKodesh, not the Nevuah per se. Okay. Halacha Beis. So now we're going to talk about the actual Nevuah, which is just like spurts of revelations, not like how we understood Ruach HaKodesh, which is just a higher consciousness. And Nevi'im, Milas, saying the Nevi'im are levels. Just like with wisdom, you have many levels. No two people are exactly alike. Kach b'Nevuah, Navi Gadol Minavu, we can rank them all if we knew how to rank them. Chulan ein royan Marian Nevuah, Ella b'Chaloim, b'Chezyayin Halayla, Oy b'Yoyim Achash Etipa Aleim Terdema. And so now he's already starting to describe how it works. Before I continue, just he's saying that it's not like it's not like it's a bunch of secrets. Like there's like a list of 100 secrets, and if you're going to become a Navi, now you've become privy to the secret club of secrets. No, it's just also a higher level of wisdom, and there's infinite increments and levels of what you can know, what you can understand. You just you entered a realm of non-human wisdom, but it still works the same way. Still lots to learn. There's always more to learn. So now he starts saying that so how does it actually look? So they can't just see a prophetic vision just like that. It has to be either in a dream, in a vision at night, or by day, but they have to fall into the slumber, this strange slumber middle of the day. Like it says, so what's that pasuk about? That pasuk is in the story with Miriam. Miriam was talking to Aaron about Moshe. They were belittling Moshe a little bit. One of the things they said was, did Hashem only speak to Moshe? Hashem spoke to us. And Hashem suddenly appears and he starts castigating them. And one of the things he says to them, if there was to be someone, a Navi, if Hashem came to someone, it would all be in a vision, it would all be in a dream. Like an Avdi Moshe, Hashem says. That's not the case for Moshe. We're going to see later. We're going to discuss Moshe and Halacha Vav. So from here, from the Hashem telling them off, so we see Hashem mentioned what a normal course of Nevuah is like. So that's where we see that. And now, what is it like during the actual Nevuah? So the Kulan, Kshemis Nabin, all these Nevi'im, when they prophesy, Vrem is thousand, their limbs tremble, and they lose their energy, which they say, Mitarfais, and their thoughts are all mixed up, lost. And now the mind is left clear to understand what it's going to see. So we're saying that their thoughts are confused, but their mind is clear. So it sounds like the outer thoughts, the not important thoughts, are sort of got pushed aside, and that actually leaves the mind very clear. And it's like possibly like any sort of powerful event where sometimes you lose the sense of yourself, you forget about yourself for a minute, and the focus and the experience is actually amplified. So that's what he seems to be describing. And now he brings a proof from Avram and Daniel. Avram, that's in the Bris Ben Absarim. So it describes as he was having this special vision, special pact with God. So this darkness came. So that's Rambam is taking that to describe what he just said. But Daniel, so in Sefer Daniel, earlier Plukim maybe are a little more famous in terms of the stories there. And then from Perek Ches and onwards, there are some visions of Daniel, and they're written in the first person. I need Daniel this, that. And he says in Perek Yud, I see a figure of a person, etc. And he says, I alone, I saw it. Whoever was with me didn't see it. But the great terror fell on them, which, by the way, the Gemara says regarding this, that Afagav the Inulai Chazim, as Layu Chazi, that's where the famous line comes from, that they didn't know what they saw, but their mazel sensed that something was happening. Chassidus, of course, speaks about this a lot. So they ran away, they hid. And I stayed alone, and I saw the great vision. And then he says, I had no energy, and Homnick, mean his face, that his face was contorted. He didn't feel like a normal situation. He didn't have any energy to stand. Okay. Now, what do they actually see in the Nevuah? What's that like? So, Rambam says, what they let the Navi know is in the form of a mashal, form of a metaphor. And then he'll immediately also get the sense of what the solution is, what the nimshal is. It comes along with the Nevuah. We don't know what it is. I'm just giving examples. So Yaakov had a dream with a ladder with malach going up and down. The Rambam says, this was actually a mashal for the kingdoms and enslaving the nation. So interesting, the Rambam is taking an idea from a medrash that the malachim going up and down were the sarim of the kingdoms. And they're going up, and that represents their enslaving other nations. So that's Avram. That's Yaakov. Chayas, that's what we mentioned already in Perek Beis. Yechezkel saw the Merkava, he saw the Chayas, the Malachim. So Rambam says that it's all mashal because it really isn't what to see. And Yirmiyah saw the pot and the staff. So this was a haftarah. It's one of the three haftarahs we read before Tisha B'Av. Say for Yirmiyah, Hashem says, "What do you see?" And Yirmiyah says, "I see this staff, shoked and ammon." And Hashem says, "Yes, shoked means that it's what I'm going to do is going to be in a hurry." And then he says, "What do you see? This pot?" And he said, "The pot represents the bad. That's coming. It's facing north. The evil's going to come from north, from Bavel." And then Hashem tells him later, and Megillah Shirah Yechezkel, and Yechezkel saw a Megillah. What's the Megillah of Yechezkel? See, in Yechezkel in the Perek Beis, it says that he saw a hand reach out and it gave him a Megillah, and it spread it open and it was written on both sides, and it had kinim, vahega, vahi, it had all kinds of sad things in it. And then it continues. He said that they actually had to eat the Megillah. It was part of that experience. And Zechariah. So what's the story with Zechariah and Treyasar? Zechariah says in Perek Hey that a malach came and said, "Look, what do you see? What's coming out?" And he says, "I see an ephah, like a big basket." And apparently represents the people that are stopping the Jews from returning to Eretz Yisrael. And then in the continuation, he says, "I raised my eyes and I saw two women are coming out, and they have wings, like the wings of a stork, and they raised the basket up between heaven and earth." Very, very interesting sight. But anyway, so the Rambam is bringing this whole list of examples to show you that there's some psukim where it says clearly that they had these very vivid visions. So that's where we see this idea. That's how Nevuah works. And it's possible that Rambam is also taking the opportunity to really drive the point home. I don't think that maybe if you're a Navi, then these things are actually happening. Like if you're a Navi, you get to see magical things happening. No, it was all a mashal, it was all a vision. There wasn't any actual pot or staff or basket or people flying. Well, there was a fire under it, I believe. Now he goes on and explains that not only these cases had a mashal, but this actually teaches us that every nevuah, even if the nevuah doesn't mention any mashal at all, which is probably most of them, and that's a chiddush. The Rambam is going to say that he thinks that he holds as a mashal in every single one, and a malach also, as we're going to see in Allah Chavav, there's a malach involved. Okay, so v'chein sh'ar neviim, the Rambam says, and the rest of the Chagim yesh b'neimin hamashal b'sreni. There are other cases also which he didn't list where there's a mashal and a solution, like these. V'yesh b'neimin and some only say the solution, which sounds like a normal nevuah, but you should know that there was really also some kind of vision, a mashal that came with it. There are actually some places where it almost just says the mashal, doesn't really explain. Like some of the stuff from Yechezkel and Zcharia, if you read the psukim, doesn't actually really spell out. You have to look in the Mefarshim to understand what it's actually trying to say. But kulam, but mashal, they're all, it's all the same for everyone. Now the Rambam clarifies that unlike Ruach HaKodesh that sounded earlier, like once you reach that state of Ruach HaKodesh, it's a constant. Nevuah is absolutely not. Its bursts very limited. So the Rambam says, "Kol neviim emes navim b'chol yirtzu." They don't prophesy whenever they feel like it, whenever they want. Al machaven and daitan, they have to focus their mind. But yeshun tzmeich and v'toiv and they have to stay in a good mood. Umisbeidin, and they keep alone. Because nevuah can't rest with sadness or with laziness. Simcha has to be joy. And in the next halacha, he's going to explain what b'nei anavim are, the ones who want to have nevuah. So it says, "Lefneihem nevel v'toif v'chol v'china." That in front of them they have all these instruments. V'hein v'akshin ha'nevuah. So I saw the Rambam says nevuah can't rest with atzva. So I saw that some quote that the Rambam says in Mer Nevuchim, he says explicitly this is actually the reason why there's no nevuah now bisman hagolus, because according to the Rambam, seemingly it's not limited to any particular time or any particular place. That doesn't mention anything about Eretz Yisrael or Beis Hamikdash or anything like that. So why is there no nevuah now? According to the Rambam, should be. So the Rambam says in Mer Nevuchim that in Galus, by default, we all have atzvos and atzvos because we're all eved nishlat meshubad leburim. It's a translation from Arabic, but we're all under the control, under the thumb of these horrible people. On the other hand, the Rebbe has a yesod in a number of places, including in the famous Sikh of Shefet and Aleph, that the Rambam is actually in Mishnah Torah. The Rambam is teaching us no, there actually could be nevuah in any time in any place. And according to the Rebbe, in Shefet, the Rebbe actually says that's the reason why the Rambam actually goes on for 4 prakim about this stuff, because it's relevant, because it's actually relevant today. And I found earlier also in another sikha many years earlier, the Sichas Chelik Yudal and Shefet and Beis, the Rebbe uses this idea to explain why Maseches Zvachim at the end it talks about bamas, building a bama for karbanas. Once they entered Yerushalayim, the Beis Hamikdash, you can't make a bama anymore. So why are we talking about it? So the Rebbe says it's a special din that if you have a navi, you can be makriv with a bama. Anytime, really. It didn't happen except with Eliyahu, but in theory, it can happen anytime. So if you say that there's nothing preventing a nevuah from happening at any time, so that means that Hilchos Bama is also relevant at any time. So Hilchos Nevuah, Hilchos Bama, it's all relevant. And that's the Rebbe's shit on that. Just regarding the Loimetech Atzvos. And what's this pasuk Lefneihem Nevel? So that's also from the story of Shmuel and Shaul. That when Shmuel was telling him how he's going to meet this Nevi'im and join the Nevi'im, so he says you're going to come to this spot, and when you come there, you're going to bump into this group of Nevi'im, and they're coming down from a bama, and in front of them are all these instruments, and they're prophesizing, and then it continues, and then you'll bisnabisa imam v'nepachta l'shacher. So the Rambam is explaining here that the Shanamar, the Rambam continues, Zeh Shanamar v'heima misnabim. What does Vehema Misnabim mean? Or he's explaining. What does that mean? He's trying to say that they had the instruments because they were trying to have nevuah. And the pasuk sounds like it's saying Vehema Misnabim that they are. So he says, they're on the course. They're trying to make it happen. The Rambam just brings an example from language that in Hebrew you could say Plainim Misgadol doesn't mean that he actually grew up. He's growing up. He's trying to grow up. So they were trying, but now means they were trying to prophesize. Not that that term would fit there, even if they didn't actually succeed. Hey, they're called Bnei Anavim, like we said, like we mentioned earlier. And even if they focus and they do everything right, it might happen, it might not happen. That's a big rule with the Rambam, that the nevuah is not guaranteed at all. You never know who, when, where. So now that he explained the nevuah according to the rules that apply to all neviim, now he's going to come explain the exception. There's Moshe. Well, anyway, his whole nevuah has a different status in Yiddishkeit, as we're going to learn in the next Perek. But we're going to see here that even in the small details, the technical details, he was different. He was better than everyone. So and that's the normal for all the early and late Nevi'im. Except for Moshe Rabbeinu, but Avon Shel Kol Nevi'im, who's our teacher, he's the master of all the Nevi'im. What is the difference? They, like we said, Nevi'im, they have to, it's a vision. Moshe Rabbeinu was awake and standing. It's just a pasuk, there's no special context, but it says when Moshe would come to the Mishkan, he was there, he's standing there, he hears the voice. No sleeping, and he's standing. So two details, because if you're sleeping, you're also not standing. So you see that Moshe had some kind of amazing capacity that it didn't go into shock, and somehow these incredible revelations were natural for him. It didn't cause him to go into some kind of shock. Like we'll see with all the other details as well. Okay, so now continuing, we're going to go through a bunch of distinctions. All Nevi'im are through a malach. All Nevi'im are through a malach, and therefore what they see is like a mashal. I'm going to comment on that in a second. Moshe Rabbeinu loyadei malach. Moshe is not. Shenem apel peh daber boy, face to face. And with dibur shalom Moshe panim upanim, face to face. And with tmunas Hashem yabit, he sees Hashem himself, the image of Hashem. Obviously not an image, but whatever the equivalent is. There's no mashal there. He's seeing it as it is. Not any metaphors and stuff like that. This is what the Torah is attesting to.
What's pshat? All Nevi'im are called malach.
No, that's through a malach. I'm gonna say something about it in a second. It says clearly that he saw a mara and it wasn't chidush. It's not like a riddle, not like a mashal of a mara. Something in mara here meaning that you see it clearly, not mara in the sense of a vision in your sleep. Mara as in seeing as it is. Now, they malach, and said, so first of all, we mentioned this earlier, reading Perek Beis, when we spoke about the malachim, and we said the Ishim are the lowest level, we said that those are the ones that the Nebuah goes through. The Nebuah goes through the Ishim. And also we mentioned earlier, in Halachah, the Ruach HaKodesh, that, now you're on the level of the Ishim. So he's clarifying again that that's how Nebuah works, that there are malachim involved. And apparently, even after the Ruach HaKodesh of Halacha Aleph, where you're on the level of the Ishim, apparently the Ishim still have something over us, because the Nebuah is still going through them. We can't get it directly. Also interestingly, it says Lufichach, because there's a malach, therefore it's a mashal. What's the connection? And by the way, earlier he said that even when there's no mashal in nevuah, there's always a mashal. So it could be the same thing with malachim, because in some of those nevuahs, the Nevi'im Taka said, the malach came to me, the malach spoke to me. So could be the Rambam is taking from there that just like those examples said, there was a malach. So even where it says Hashem told me, you should really know that it was really a malach, and indirectly that's how you knew what Hashem said. Now, so what's going on? So I found someone quotes in the Moreh Nevuchim where the Rambam actually asks on himself. He apparently says that some Nevi'im did hear from Hashem. And he said, I have this whole rule that everyone hears from a malach. And he answers that for these malachim, what the in-between thing for them is the kayach hamadama, that they have the imagination, which probably is equivalent to the idea of the mashal. And Moshe was without it. So there it sounds like it's not, it's one or the other. I'm not saying I have a clear shot here, but interestingly, the Rambam says something slightly different than the Moreh Nevuchim. And to add a little more insight, the Rambam is akdama to his Pirush on Perek Avos. In his introduction, it's called Shmeina Prakim, the 8 chapters. So in the 7th chapter, he speaks about the Chazal that Moshe saw Bas Baklari HaMeira, clear glass, and everyone else saw the unclear glass, which is probably the foundation for what the Rambam is talking about here as well. So the Rambam says, what's the unclear glass? The Rambam says that every kusaron that a Navi has, something that he's lacking, that's like a screen. And he says there's no condition that a Navi shouldn't be flawless, because that would be impossible. And he starts going through some big examples. Shlomo was a Navi, and he had a thing with women. David was a Navi, but we say he killed too many people. Eliyahu, it says Hashem got upset at him, that he's getting too upset at the Yidden, he's being too zealous against the Yidden. So Shmuel was afraid of Shaul. Hashem tells Shmuel, why are you afraid of Shaul? Yaakov was afraid of Esav. He says, these are the screens of every Navi that obstructs their vision. Moshe tore through every single one except the last. What's the last one? The seichel itself. If you have human seichel, and so that was the whole thing with Hareini No, that we learned in Perek Aleph, that Moshe wanted to know more. I should also point out that Ramban argues on this whole shita of the Rambam here regarding Malachim, the role of Malachim in Nevuah, and regarding visions in Parshas Vayera. The Rambam famously says in Moreh Nevuchim that even the 3 Malachim coming to Avraham was also a vision. He's consistent. There are no Malachim, you can't see them. So if you see Malachim, it must be a vision. That's what the Rambam says. And the Ramban takes the Rambam to task over there, and he goes through all kinds of, he says, light, Malachim came to light. Was the whole light thing in Stein also a vision? How would that work? He's having a whole exchange with them. I want to go, he takes them to task, and he says it can't be true. The Malachim could have a physical manifestation, and Malachim, he says, are not involved in every Nevuah. This is a big topic. I'm just pointing out there's some, a lot said on this topic. Also regarding that Moreh Nevuchim, I should point out there's a Rabbi in Sichos in Chelek Chavei Vayera Aleph mentions the Moreh Nevuchim about Avraham, and he says it doesn't fit actually with what the Rambam says in Mishnah Torah. We shouldn't always insert what the Rambam says in Moreh Nevuchim. We shouldn't inject it into what the Rambam says in Mishnah Torah because sometimes it's different. And then Rabbi mentions also the Rambam listed other things that are visions in Halacha Gimel. He didn't list this, although the Rambam seemed to be listing the ones that were mefurish. Okay, but the Rebbe says there that in Hilchos Avelos, the whole Sikha is about in Hilchos Avelos, the Rambam says we learn Achnasos Orchim from Avram, from the 3 Malachim. So if we learn Achnasos Orchim from the 3 Malachim, so how would it fit to say that there was a vision? How could we learn anything from that? So the Rebbe says we actually don't accept that the Mishnah Torah that took that to that extreme. Moreh Nevuchim is different. Anyway. So Pel Peh, so these Pesukim Pel Peh, that was already mentioned in Halacha Beis. That's from what Hashem told Miriam. Dibra Hashem, Moshe Panim is after the Egel. It says Moshe would leave and come back. It was the whole Seder. So it says then he would speak to Hashem. Hashem would speak to Moshe face to face. Tmus Hashem Yabit is also from what Hashem told Miriam. Okay. It's all there. Continuing Halacha Vav, and all the VM are terrified and they melt down in terror. Moshe is not. It's like speaking to a friend also from after the Egel. Just like you're not taken aback, intimidated by your friend talking to you. Moshe could handle Nevuah in the same way. It was a very casual, easy thing. To continue, another distinction is that the Nevi'im don't, like we said, they don't prophesy whenever they want. Like we said in Allah Dal and Hey, but Moshe Rabbeinu, he's not like that. Whenever you want, Tzurach comes, the Nevuah comes. He doesn't have to even spend any time trying to focus. He's always ready, like an angel. And that's why he was able to prophesy whenever he wanted. Imdu ve'esh v'ma'itzav Hashem lachem. That's the story of Pesach Sheni. They came to complain to him, we missed Pesach. And he said, okay, wait a second, let me go find out. We could do it on the spot. It's interesting that he says that the Ruach HaKodesh also comes. Earlier it sounded like the Ruach HaKodesh is always there, but it could be that's only if you're actually focusing on Ruchnias. If you're dealing with Yidden, everyday stuff, maybe you don't have the Ruach HaKodesh at that moment, but he could get it back in a second, the Ruach HaKodesh with the Nevuah, and he doesn't have to do anything. To finish halacha this is by the Aseres Adibros in Dvarim. He's recounting the story of Aseres Adibros. He said, please, we don't want to die, you tell us. So Hashem said, fine, you go back to your tents, and Moshe, you stand with me. So Halamar says this is actually a general idea. All prophets, so they go back to Alechem, they go back to your wife, to your family. They go back to their tent, as it were. All the bodily needs, like anyone else. That's why the Nevi'im are married. They have a normal family life, to whatever extent. But Moshe is not going back to Alechem. You're standing here. So that's why he left his wife, which is actually what Miriam was complaining about over there. And anything similar, he was connected with Hashem, his mind connected with Hashem, and that glory never left him. His face was glowing, and he was holy like an angel. And now we're going to explain how does the Nevuah affect us? How does a miracle fit in? So, first of all, Navi could just be just purely for himself. He's just expanding his knowledge, great things that he's learning. He could be sent to a nation, to people, to a kingdom. With a message to teach them what they should do or what they shouldn't do. And there is a miracle, they should know that it's real. We don't just believe any miracle. This is very important for the Rambam. If you have all the conditions that were listed in the beginning, that you're a very lofty person, and he's on track, it looks like he's on track to be a Navi. Now the miracle comes, and he says, Hashem sent me. Then, here's the mitzvah. This is why we're talking about this mitzvah. Elov Tishmun. And that's in Shaftim. There's a whole parsha about Nevuah, the mitzvah of this mitzvah. Now to finish off, the Rambam says, you can be skeptical just because he's a candidate and just because he did a miracle doesn't mean it must be true. Maybe there's some trick behind this. Be skeptical. Alpha became mitzvah l'shmaya. That's where the mitzvah is, and even then there's a mitzvah to listen, even though technically, why should you believe him? Because he seems worthy. We accept that he assume that he's telling the truth. That's the mitzvah. Just like we're supposed to believe two kosher witnesses. They can also be lying. Anyone can be lying. Because we have no reason to suspect them, we believe them. But he quotes these two psukim, just an idea that things are hidden from us. Hashem knows. We have to follow what we can see. And there's also Shmuel and Shaul. After Hashem didn't like Shaul, he said, "You like Shaul? Don't look at his externals. Hashem sees inside. A person sees the exterior of Hashem Yer Lalev. So Hashem knows the truth. We have to follow what we see."
And you slid into home run, huh?
Hola.